Hi, this is Teddy. Today's episode is about Georgia. Here are some facts about Georgia. The capital and largest city is Atlanta. Georgia is the 8th most populous state. The governor is Republican Nathan Deal. The senators are Republicans Johnny Isakson and David Perdue. Georgia sends 14 representatives to the U.S. House of Representatives, 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats.
Welcome back to Two Broads Talking Politics. I am your co-host, Sophie. I'm here with your other co-host, Kelly. Hello, Kelly.
Hey, everybody.
And tonight we are talking with Aisha Yaqoob. She is a candidate for Georgia House of Representatives from District 97 in Georgia. Welcome, Aisha.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you with us. Let's sort of start off simple. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you want to run for Georgia House of Representatives.
Yeah, so I actually was born and raised in the South, and I've lived in Georgia in particular for almost 20 years now. I grew up in a really small town that has since become, this diverse community of immigrants and people of color, and it all changed while I was growing up. But once I started to get more interested in politics and learning about the process, I came to realize that our government just didn't have much representation. And I was talking as local as city council, county commission, and especially our state legislature. And so back in 2015, I actually got involved with a nonpartisan voter education initiative that I had started. And through that, really got to activate my community, in particular the Muslim community here in Georgia, and getting active in the 2016 election. And then, as you know, what happened after that election, I was really moved to continue on and do some very specific policy work to make sure that I was continuing to work in the community, but also fighting to protect our rights. And so for the last couple of years, I've worked as a policy director for a local nonprofit organization that works on immigrant rights issues. And through that, I actually became an advocate at our state capitol. And so I learned the ins and outs of how legislation is really made at a state level and just how intense the game can get at some times and how to actually get things done that are not usually the textbook way. And so I hope to continue doing this. And once I realized that my representative, Representative Brooks Coleman, was retiring, I thought it would be a really great opportunity for me to throw my hat in the ring. Now, he was elected before I was born, and he was elected in 92, and I was born in 93. So I am quite young to run a race for a seat that had previously been inhabited by someone that was older and had really built up his career around public education. But I do believe that since I did go to school in the district that I'm running in, I got to experience the public education system, and I really understand a lot of what working class families go through. I thought it was my time to run, and the party had told me that there wasn't anyone serious running for that seat. My community was fully behind me, and I just kind of took on the challenge after realizing how much of an impact state legislatures can have just in our daily lives. So that's really why I got into it. It's been an incredible experience so far, but there's still a long way to go until November.
And you don't yet know who you're running against. So you won your primary, but there's a runoff for the Republican side.
Yeah, so I won my primary with 72% of the vote, which was amazing, but it's a little bit hard because my district is still a red district. Trump won it by 12 points back in 2016, and it's a scary number, but I don't really let it get to me because I realize that when you look at the candidates that have run for any down ballot race in my district, we haven't had a serious Democrat run in over 15 years. Particularly for my seat, we haven't had any Democrat run in over 15 years. And over those last 15 years, we've had an incredible change in population. If you look at the number of households, if you look at the kinds of people that have moved here. So I'm really hoping that because we have such enthusiastic and different candidates on the ballot this year that we can really work on that turnout. But yeah, I don't know who my opponent is. There are 2 potential candidates that are running in the runoff in 2 weeks. So I'll either be running up against a woman who, lives in one part of my district, but is really focusing on a fair tax platform, and then really adding, coincidentally, or I guess you can say ironically, added illegal immigration to her platform once she realized that I would be her opponent. And then the other candidate is an older man who is a pastor and kind of running on like a conservative values, religious freedom type messaging. So either one of those will be pretty tough, but I have a pretty young, enthusiastic team that is ready to fight till the end, and I'm not intimidated.
Well, and it looks like the difference between the number of Democratic ballots cast in the primary and the number of Republican ballots cast in the primary was only about 800 votes. So this could come down to a pretty close race.
Yeah, and that's really what we're thinking. I mean, obviously you have heard of Stacey Abrams, who's running for governor here. And, part of our coordination, at least for candidates really on my level, is making sure that as Stacey is bringing candidates out to vote, that they really know who their down ballot races are too. And so I'm going to be trying my hardest to make sure that I'm talking to folks that I'm talking to, but also trying to loop in some of those voters that are coming out just for Stacey or maybe just for our congressional seat.
And so this district is one of many, many, many small, tiny little districts that are surrounding the Atlanta area.
Mm-hmm.
Where, sort of how far from the city of Atlanta is it?
So my district covers parts of northern Gwinnett County, and Gwinnett County is actually part of what, you would consider metro Atlanta. I believe my district is about 30 miles east of Atlanta, give or take, depending on where you are in the county. And, my part of the district in particular is interesting because it still has remnants of old school Gwinnett. So that, it's still got some, untapped land. It still has very old homes and old neighborhoods. And if you look at the county, though, it became a majority minority county back in 2016. The county went blue for the first time in over 30 years in 2016. So a lot of people got really excited by what's happening in Gwinnett. But I always have to remind them that even though most of the county went blue, my district was still pretty conservative in 2016. But I also always try to remind people that there's such an untapped voter population here, especially when it comes to Asian Americans. If you look at the population, the actual population of my district, it's 24% Asian American, which is pretty significant for a place like Georgia.
So what has it been like for you running for office as a Muslim American woman? You're pretty young. For someone who's running for office, especially I get the impression that state legislatures tend to be a lot older typically because these are not full-time seats in Georgia. And so what has this been like for you? Have people been welcoming of your candidacy? What has it been like on the ground?
So I'll be very honest. When I first announced, there was a lot of excitement from my community, people that I knew, people that have worked with me in the past. But I don't think that I had very much support from, other folks in the political spectrum, because I didn't think that they really saw the potential in me running for office. And I don't think it really hit them until closer to the primary. And I think that's for a couple of different reasons. I think they realized that I could actually do it as a 25-year-old, outraise all my Republican opponents, win my primary by 72% of the vote, and then actually put together like a really, really great campaign team. And so I think those were all very surprising things. I know the party has its own priority districts, and mine's not quite a priority, but it's still on their radar because they've realized that there's actually potential to flip the seat this year. And so, that's what I would say from from this side of the aisle. Looking at the other side, I still think that they recognize me as a threat. They haven't really come after me yet in particular, at least not that I've seen. The only thing, like I did mention before, is really helping them cater their message a little bit more to create this stark difference between me and whichever candidate makes it past the runoff. But I will say, just generally talking to people at the door, I was talking to people for the primary, and so it was a different group of people. It was primarily progressives, and even then I had a a really great response from people just being really grateful that I was even reaching out to them at their doors. Like I said, we haven't really had competitive races in my district. So I had people telling me that they've never had candidates come to their door, much less Democrats. They were really excited to see a Democrat running, period. I had a woman in my neighborhood actually tell me, she was like, "Oh, you're a Democrat? There's only like 10 of us here in this district." And actually, towards the end of the campaign, I kind of felt like this like mini celebrity in some ways, because I remember knocking on doors in this one neighborhood, and I spoke to a gentleman and gave him my walk card and answered his questions. And then I started walking in the other direction to knock on some more doors. And then I see this woman running at me, and she was like, "Oh my God, I just missed you. My husband told me you were there, but I really wanted to meet you." And so then we were just having a conversation like in the middle of the street. And then like other neighbors just walked over and got really excited that I was there. And it just turned into this really great opportunity for me to connect with voters. And because my field game is really strong, I have noticed, just how valuable it really is. And of course, I've had some unfortunate experiences. I've had the cops called on me. I've had people slam the door in my face. And, even some of my canvassers, I'll give you an example. My sister has been canvassing for me, and she doesn't wear a headscarf, so she's not visibly Muslim. But she was speaking to a woman at her door and explaining about my campaign and what my platform is. And then as soon as she handed my walk card, which had my picture on it, she was like, "Oh, sorry, I'm not interested anymore." So we've had a couple of experiences like that. But, considering the district that I'm in, I would say it is, more positive than I was expecting it to be.
You said that one of the opponents that you might face has added illegal immigration to her platform. Is immigration actually an issue that people are responding to in Georgia? Is this something where she's trying to sort of stoke fears? What does that look like on the ground in your district?
So it's actually a combination of, maybe it was opposition research. I don't know exactly, but part of my job over the last couple of years has been advocating for immigrant issues at our state capitol. And so I've actively been speaking out against legislation that's come out primarily by the Republican Party that really targets undocumented immigrants. And so I've been on the news multiple times, and even very recently during the campaign, speaking out against our sheriff for his harmful policies that work with ICE. And so I think it was just around that time when she had updated her platform. I wasn't tracking it very closely, but that seems like about the right time. So, her addition of that component could have just been in response to, finding out the work that I do and really what's been a big part of my career for the last couple of years. But I also think that it's worth mentioning that our state has had a really bad track record when it comes to anti-immigrant legislation. The other day, I had to put together a timeline of anti-immigrant legislation in Georgia. And, it started back in like 2005, and they just kept increasing the horrificness of the bills, but also just the sheer number of bills that were introduced every year. And it significantly got worse and worse every year. First, it was simply targeting one population of immigrants, one ethnic group in particular. And as the years have progressed, and especially last year and this year, the legislation just seems like it's so broad that it could impact immigrants that are documented, undocumented, refugees, asylees. And we see them particularly getting introduced by candidates running for higher office. And it was actually a shock for us to see some of the candidates running for higher office be so bold about it. And I'm sure you've seen commercials from Bryan and Michael Williams with their anti-immigrant undertones. But I can't help but mention that even Casey Cagle, who seems to be the front runner in the Republican runoff, he was the one that introduced the most horrific anti-immigrant bill that we'd ever seen. And that was SB 452, which I led the effort to defeat. And he used his position as lieutenant governor to really push it through. And we kept fighting back, and we actually ended up defeating the bill in the last minutes of session. We were able to convince over 30 Republicans to walk out of the vote if it actually did come up, and leadership knew that, so they never brought it up for a vote, and they had to adjourn the session. But if you look at his campaign ads, if you look at his messaging, he keeps talking about how he passed the most tough immigration enforcement bill in the state, and it's not true because we actually defeated that with our own hands. So it's not something that he has talked about as openly as Brian Kemp or Michael Williams.